Hello and welcome to the Xtra Edge. This is a sports analytics podcast powered by Connexon Sports. I'm Dave Gronczynski, and today we're talking with Dr. Simon Overkamp, who is the head of strength and conditioning for the German Handball Federation. First of all, thank you, Dr. Overkamp, for taking some time to join us here on the Xtra Edge.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me. Always.
So now, I know you spent some time at the Olympic Training Center in Germany. You came to the United States to play college rugby on scholarship at Division II Lindenwood University in Missouri, the home of the Lions, where you also earned your master's degree. But I'm not done. You worked as an assistant strength and conditioning coach at the University of Iowa. Even did some strength and conditioning work in the NFL with the San Francisco 49ers. And now you're overseeing all of the athletes, both men and women, with the German Handball Federation. So let's start there. Can you first talk about your current role with the German Handball Federation?
Of course. As you said, my job title is the head of strength and conditioning for the German Handball Federation. And not only do I oversee anything performance-wise for both the men's and women's team, but I'm also overseeing our under 18 and under 20 teams on the indoor version of handball for both genders. And we also are pretty successful actually with a beach version of handball. Our women's side just got back from China, where they won their second consecutive World Cup title. So besides from being in charge of those teams, I also am the liaison and anything communication with the pro level teams. And then with of course, with their coaching staff. So that's kind of my role with us at the German Handball Federation.
Well, you wouldn't be on this podcast if you weren't into data. And I know that you are into data. So on this podcast, we always talk about how coaches collect data and analytics and then use it to get insights and then take actions. Data, insights, and action. So let's start with some data, Coach. When were you first exposed to it, and when did you think, boy, this could make a difference for my athletes?
You mentioned my time in the US, so that was probably my starting point in just collecting data, but also looking into it and what kind of benefit I get from those data, or more specifically my athletes get from that kind of data. And I was kind of two-sided with subjective data, like asking athletes how they're feeling, developing our own questionnaires, and then just finding out about chronic versus acute load, and then what significance it makes, and other stress factors in the athlete's life that are not just sports related, also school related, private life related. And then on the other side, objective data, not just on the playing field with GPS or LPS related data, but also in the weight room. Like my biggest interest, maybe you can tell that, or you can see that I'm less of an endurance guy and more of a strength guy. So my biggest pillar in coaching was always velocity based training, and then played around a little over the years with different systems to measure bar speed or speed of movement, and what tells me about athletes' fatigue, and then also being able to use that to improve athletes' performance.
Well, and I know from your rugby and football days back at Iowa, I'm sure you have experience with GPS, and now you're using IMU. Can you talk a little bit about the systems you've used over the years and the advantages they have provided?
To be honest with you, at that point in my career, and probably at that point in just the usage of GPS, it was more collecting data than anything. And I think some of the data we collected was only put in perspective, like years in the future, or years in the years of collecting more data, because you always, as you know, you always need a baseline and something to compare the data to. And but once we got those years under the belt, we started seeing trends, and like I said, in regards to fatigue, and then obviously in return to sports, or return to play activities. So like, what was that guy's baseline before? So now he's running slower, or his heart rate is increasing. So that these kind of things, being mechanical load like speed or jump height or jump capacity, and then also metabolic loads like what's used to be his heart rate, what's his heart rate now under fatigue, and then if we compare these things, it tells us a lot about the state of our athletes.
And so with the IMU system, now, I mean, you're overseeing all of the athletes in the German Handball Federation. That's a lot of athletes. What are there metrics now that you kind of hone in on that you like the most? You mentioned, you're big on velocity-based training, but are there one or two, maybe three metrics that you think are most important? Maybe not so much in the weight room, or give me, maybe there's some that are more important in the weight room than there are, out, during a match or training. What metrics do you like the most?
Mm-hmm. For me, it's really the main benefit of using the IMU system is any metric that's kind of intensity related. I'm not so much interested in for example, the overall distance they ran, or the overall number of jumps they did, but I'm more interested in let's say in like a tight game or tight practice situation, like how fast can somebody change direction, or like how fast somebody slow down. So really what it comes down to being a good athlete in regard to the sport of handball. So anything that's really sport specific, like I said, acceleration, deceleration, change of direction, jump height from different positions, from different jumping approaches. So these things that really put a huge mechanical load on the players, but also tell me if somebody is at 100% or not. And especially if we're looking at a tournament where it's not unusual to have nine games over the span of 18 days. Obviously, everybody is going to decline with fatigue piling up. Usually, the teams that fare best during Worlds, the European Championships, or now coming up the Olympics, are the ones that are able to rest their players before their performance declines too much, and not just performance-wise, but also obviously it's going to be a huge health issue, not just for us, but also for the clubs the guys are playing for.
Well, and I know you're working with both men and women athletes, and we have our women's initiative here at Connects, and I'm just curious: are you collecting different data on the female athletes than you do the male athletes?
Actually, I don't. I collect the same data, but I've made especially with handball, I made the experience that the female athletes are actually way more interested themselves in the data that we collect and what it actually means. So after a training session, I've learned that I can close down shop, or close down my laptop before we talked some things through. They always want to know what does that mean, Simon, and what does this mean, and what can I do to improve. So that's pretty cool, and obviously it helps me a lot with buy-in and just the role of collecting data during practice or during games. So I feel like sometimes we don't have the system. It feels like they're missing something. So kind of like they get used to it and they want that feedback and they want to know how they're doing, how they're performing. But in regards to the metrics or the data that we collect, I don't make a difference between a male and female. Goals or the objective is always the same. Decrease the risk of injury and improve their performance. It's always going to be the same.
And so do you feel like the athletes, now that you've had some multiple seasons tracking and you have some data under your belt, do you see them more often now, especially when the preseason starts? Do they come in and say, hey, what was I doing last year, and start comparing, what they're doing now to what they were doing then?
Mm-hmm. The special situation we have with both teams is, since we're not a club team, just a national team, we only have a limited amount of weeks and then training sessions together. So you, especially on the women's side, where it's not as common to have a system like the IMU at the club team level, you have this huge black box where you have, sometimes you go weeks or months with them being at a club and not having access to the data. So what we did on the women's side, we kind of developed a catalog of different drills and what it actually means in not just the accumulated acceleration load, but like in jump height, number of jumps we want to see from a drill, and then decline in acceleration or deceleration. What is actually the baseline for something, and not just for the team, but for the individual player. And that's actually a huge difference to the men's side. Like I said, the metrics are the same, but all the clubs teams are using the IMU as we do, and there's not really a black box. And obviously, we share the data, so I know at what load the guys are coming in, and the club team knows now like after this Olympic summer what kind of load did my guys receive. So there's obviously a huge benefit for both sides, for us as the German Handball Federation and for the club teams, but more than anything for the risk of injury for the players, just having solid data and knowing where on both sides where to pick up and where to start with the guys.
Well, load management is such a big deal in handball because of the schedule and the grind. And not just, I mean, not only that, but the sport, it's a hard sport. I mean, it's a combination: basketball, football, rugby. There's, you banging against each other, running up and down, short sprints. But the load management aspect of handball, especially during an Olympic year, when your schedule now lengthens even more. Can you talk about the grueling schedule in handball and why load management is so important?
Yeah, the sport of handball, if we're looking at the level that the players that make up the national team are playing at, we're looking at 60 to 70 games, and as you said, as a full contact sport with a floor that's not very easy on your joints. You have a lot of just overuse issues, and not just in the shoulder, but in the back and the knees. So anything that's kind of getting worked a lot doing games and practice. And this special situation with the Olympic Games, if we're looking at a season of handball, usually the guys have off time during the summer. But during this summer, we got the Olympics. So after the last game, which was on the last weekend of May, they got 2 weeks of vacation. Obviously with homework already, with the gym sessions and with the running sessions. And then we got together. We've now been together for 4 weeks in the Olympic preparations. And then obviously the physical aspect is going to be on the forefront during those first few weeks. And then if we're performing well, the medals are given out on August 11th during the men's tournament, and August 10th in the women's tournament. And then they got anywhere between 10 and 12 days before the league or the season in Germany starts. I'm not talking about practice. This is when the season picks up again. And then during the tournament, again, if we're reaching that point of the tournament, they've had 9 games over the course of 18 days. And then not the same preparation as the players that did not compete in the Olympics, and they just get thrown back into the mix. And then hopefully they get some time, some days off, and then proper build up to their first game of the season. But the reality is a little bit different. Obviously, the clubs are having a hard time resting their best players. Their best players are our players, so obviously we're going to have a hard time resting these guys. And then as I said, they're starting end of August again, and then it's all the way through Christmas. And then after Christmas, we got Worlds coming up. Again, 3 days off, playing Worlds for 4 weeks, and then it's 3 or 4 days off, and then the second half of the season, and then I get summer off. So pretty much they're just playing and training through an entire year, which is barely any time off, and then the demands of handball just ridiculous. And then on top of that, we're clearly number 2 in Germany, right after soccer or football. And then the style of travel is a little bit different. So sometimes you don't even get to fly, but you jump on a bus and then you travel 20 hours to somewhere in Eastern Europe, play a game, and then travel 20 hours back. So it's very tough on somebody that's 6'8" and 250 pounds, being crammed in the seat for extended periods of time. So, like I said, we're number 2, and we're especially on the men's side. There's financially it's becoming more and more attractive, but we still got a long way to go, I think, in regards to keeping our players safe and healthy.
Well, you say you're number 2, but you're number 1 in our hearts. I just want to let you know that. So, especially for coming on the podcast, I really appreciate it. But I'm really curious to find out then now, I mean, because like the load management part of it is so important, and you just laid out like why it's so important. How are you? I mean, you don't have to name names, but if you can, do you have a specific example of how the data helps you with load management, whether it's for a specific player or even, an entire team? How does data help you manage the load of your players?
Yeah, like I said, this is easier on the men's side since there's just more data and no black boxes or weeks and months where we don't have data. So we got a pretty good idea what is a heavy load on the mechanical side and what is a moderate load, and for every single player. So since we know we can't just, we're having a hard time asking coaches to pull players during games, especially during close games. But we have the opportunity to pull players during practice. So if I know an accumulated acceleration load of 700 is 100% or is his baseline, and he's had a lot of games and tough games, and we always have the opportunity to say, okay, today is going to be a moderate day for him. Let's keep him at 70% of that, and coach, I know need him for your tactical drills, so I'm gonna individualize his warm up so his load is not gonna creep up on us, and keep him fresh. And then maybe he's out for some part of the session, and gonna do some stuff with the trainers, and kind of give his joints a little bit of rest. So we're trying to individualize these training sessions as much as possible, very well knowing that there are situations where we can recommend something like that, but it's professional sports and it's not always gonna happen like that. And at the end of the day, it's the head coach whose head is kind of always on the chopping block, and he's got the last call. And obviously, in tight situations, he's gonna need his best guys on the floor. And that's just the reality of professional sports.
But taking this individualized approach, have you seen it make a difference in the players? Is player availability going up, whether it's with a specific player or even just across the whole team? Are you seeing a difference with this approach?
Mm-hmm. If we're looking at the the entire year or season of handball, the risk of injuries, especially ACL injuries, these numbers really skyrocket either in September, if it is an Olympic year, so they got a lot of playing time and no real preparation for the season, or in February, like I said, the international tournament, either European Championship or World Championship, is played in the month of January, and then it's 3 or 4 days time until the season starts again. Again, no real preparation, just the tournament. So those are the times during the year where we see like injuries like ACL tears just skyrocket. And we just now, and this is our third season using the IMU system, and we've seen so far, obviously, that the data is a little bit is not there where same as back in Iowa when we first started using GPS units. But this is the first Olympics, so I can't say anything or compare anything for the month of September. But during the month of February, we've seen a decline in knee injuries or ACL injuries of 17%, which may not sound much. Again, like I said, and we are just getting the hang of it and improving our communication with the club team side. But I think that's somewhere to start off. And I think any injury that we prevented helps.
Yeah, and so are you? I mean, obviously, before the data, you saw the spike in injuries, and now with the data, you're seeing a decrease. Is any time along the line, whether it was with a specific player or a team, did you ever have like an aha moment where you're like, man, if we didn't have the data, we may not have been able to do that with this player, or this team may have not been able to accomplish what they have accomplished? Have you ever had any of those, man, thank goodness we had the data moments?
We actually have those moments quite a few times, and not just me, but also the handball coaches. Like I said, we're trying to have like a playbook, not just in regards to tactic, but also an overview. What drill does produce what kind of load. And especially those handball coaches sometimes surprised like how much of a load a specific drill creates. And like I said, handball is always going to be a game of timing and intensity. Let's say the court is rather smaller in size during a specific drill. Actually, the load is going to be higher, even though you would expect the distance that is being run to be higher, but also the amount of accelerations and decelerations is going to be lower because there's more space. And the smaller the space gets, the harder the cuts and the changes of directions are going to be. And if we're looking at some of the positions in handball, like a shooter or a pivot, these guys are well above 100 kilos. And the more times, especially under fatigue, somebody has to put on the brakes or accelerate again, it's going to be creating a lot more load, and it's going to be more stress on the system. So sometimes a drill that was the coaches expected to be lower in load or lower in intensity, it was just the other way around. And that was really interesting for us, and it got the coaches thinking too, to schedule their training, not just the session, but the training week or the entire season a little bit different, and kind of build up in a more data-driven way towards designing those drills. So that was kind of like a big eye-opening thing, not just for me on the strength and conditioning side, but also on the sport coaches side. That's
great to hear. And I'm wondering if you're collecting the same data on men and women. Are you seeing any trends like this on the female side as well, that you're collecting the data, especially since they're more interested in it? I mean, are you seeing any trends that are beneficial to the athletes?
Yeah, like I said, one thing is collecting the data. Second thing is gearing or designing our training in a way that is not just less risk for the players, but we're also designing, or we are just using the data to actually gear what we do in the weight room for them. So we noticed with the females a huge decrease in the ability to not just decelerate, but to accelerate again during the second half, which is obviously kind of obvious because they're more fatigued. Now we started implementing drills and exercises in the weight room where we just ask them to do exactly that. We have them fatigued, and then in a safe setting, implement jumps or short sprints, even with them being fatigued. Whereas if you look at any exercise science book, you got to do those things when they're as fresh as possible and as rested as possible. But that's just not the nature of handball. You're going to be asked to sprint, stop, and jump as high and fast as you can in minute 58, just as you are going to be asked to do that in minute 3. So we're just trying to gear our training towards getting them as resilient as possible, and not just training a specific capacity like sprinting or jumping, but also training that under fatigue and being able to repeat that performance as many times as possible.
One of the things we're doing on the female side that the teams we're working with is we're trying to create cycle-oriented workouts or cycle syncing workouts. And I know you're big on the daily questionnaires. On top of you're still a little old school. On top of the technology that you use, are you using daily questionnaires with your female athletes, or just in general? What are the daily questionnaires doing for you on the men's side and then also on the women's side? And let's start on the women's side. And are you honing in on maybe cycle syncing workouts?
Yeah, as of right now, we are asking the men and the women the same questions. Like, how are you feeling? How did you sleep? How many hours of sleep did you get? Asking for muscle soreness, mental fatigue, and then we're asking them to rate their session, their training session. We know the length of the session, but we do not know how and we collecting data, but we do if we don't ask them, we don't know how tiring the individual athlete was feeling during that session. So we're still asking that, even though we're collecting the mechanical load. So those are the questions we're asking both genders. And since you've been asking about cycle-oriented training, I think that's very interesting, and I feel like that's probably the topic that's most popular around the globe right now, and that's got the highest ceiling at this point. We obviously, this is going to be I'm missing the English word. So the players can decide whether they want to answer the question, or if they don't want to answer that, it's not going to be it's up to them. And as of right now, it's probably around like 50-50 with the women's team. And I think the biggest challenge in that is going to be how do we know that we during this different phases of the cycle, different strength qualities can be trained better or worse. But like, how are we gonna implement that into our handball team training, where we need every player on the court, especially if we're going through our playbook? So that's going to be the biggest challenge, to individualize that. It's somewhat easy to put to consider the cycle during their strength training or during their speed training, whatever is not handball related. And as I said, it's going to be very interesting to find ways to implement that into handball training. Because as of right now, everybody's kind of at the same points. They haven't figured out how to individualize or base around the cycle. Not just the individual training session, but the team training session. That's going to be the biggest challenge.
Well, and I heard you say that you feel like we may finally be shifting towards coaches who are leaning away from more is better, and that old school mentality of like when we were playing, whether it's football. I remember going through 3-hour football practices, and one time we didn't play. We got no water. These crazy things that we went through. When we were playing, but we're just so much smarter now. And you're saying that there's an influx now of younger coaches who used to play, and they are really now starting to adapt to using technology and adjusting things. that are, I guess, more modern. And I've even heard you talk about how you like to use, you'll take all your players out on the sand for workouts because of all the, the ankle injuries that you're dealing with, the knee injuries. And then, you're doing a lot of things above the head for the shoulders and things like that. Where maybe back in the day, old school coach would say, what do you mean take them to the beach? Are you nuts? But now it makes so much more sense. Can you talk a little bit about that? The shift in thinking, and it goes along lines with what we're talking about here with, cycle syncing workouts and just, on the men's and women's side. And can you explain a little bit more, the shift that's happening with coaches now adapting to using data?
I think it has a lot to do with coaching staffs growing larger and larger and just having specialists in different areas. I mean, it's nothing new to have like a goalkeeper coach or a team psychologist and then the physiotherapist, and then with the sport of handball, the position of the strength and conditioning coach becomes more and more popular. And I feel like to me it's actually common sense. If I have a specialist for a certain discipline, like why not use his or her knowledge in that discipline to my benefit? And like I said, it's a cycle. Like the old school hard-nosed coaches didn't when they were playing, none of this existed. So obviously don't have like a reference, or they did not get to enjoy the benefit of having somebody that's actually specializes in that, being a factor in that. And then with younger coaches, they are now starting to in their playing days having experienced those kind of experts in different areas. It makes a lot easier. And then, as you said, data is always important. So otherwise, coach is going to have an opinion. I'm going to have an opinion, but I'm able to back up my opinion with data. If we're talking about players, hey, how fast is she moving, or how high is he jumping, and why is he not jumping as high anymore? What's wrong? It's always it's usually a pretty good conversation starter to say the least. And I feel like we're still growing, and I think other sports you mentioned football or soccer or baseball are still steps ahead. But I feel like in sport of handball, we're just now hitting our stride, and it's definitely moving in the right direction. And like I said, the two main pillars being improving performance and reducing the risk of injury. And once coaches see that what we're doing, and we're just measuring for the heck of it, it's only going to be in their best interest. And like I said, it's usually their head on the chopping block, and if they're making the experience, hey, that the guy is actually helping me to have my best players healthy when I really need them, suddenly they start listening. So that's obviously that's nice.
Well, you say we're moving in the right direction, which I'm glad to hear, but I'm just curious, is there anything still missing? Are there things that come up where like, boy, I really wish I could figure that out with the data, or I mean, just in general with the questionnaire or something? I mean, do you ever come across anything that you think is still missing?
Like I said, biggest thing still missing on the women's side would be more teams or more clubs just using data and not. I mean, having a questionnaire is pretty standard now, but having in our case an LPS measuring system since we're indoor is not common at all. So I got out of the 17 female players at the Olympics, I got one of them that's actually using Kinexon IMU at the club. And then on the men's side, it's 17 out of 17. So that's going to make it a lot easier. So I can understand the clubs to an extent. If they have a limited budget, they rather have 18 world-class players instead of 16. But I feel like if we're finding ways to keep those 16 healthy, that's probably going to be a bigger benefit than having 18. And all 18 are being overused all the time and not being able to play most of the time. So if we're asking for one thing missing, that probably be it. Just more consistent. And on the women's side, obviously there's going to be less money involved, and it's always going to be a budget thing. But I feel like making a smart decision in keeping your players healthy would be in the best interest, not just of us, but on the clubs as well.
Do you think the study, well, I mean, we'll call it a study, you looking at the numbers and then coming back in February and you've got a 17% decrease in injuries. Do you think when coaches start, or whoever's the decision makers are with these clubs, start hearing things like that will help shift things in the other direction?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, if we're not collecting data and using that data, it's just going to be you got an opinion, I got my opinion. So I present those numbers. Obviously names are blacked out and everything. And like I said, it's not a study yet, but it will be a study. And once we get to doing that, let's be as transparent as possible and be as open about as possible. I always get feedback, even if the female side having an IMU system is not common. I still encourage the sports coaches or the S&C coaches to ask as many questions as possible, so they can kind of lean into those decision makers at the club level. Hey, we need that too, and we want that too, and that guy's making some sense. So that's kind of the route that I'm going with that.
Yeah, that is awesome to hear. This has been phenomenal. And I just want to ask you, is there anything that I didn't ask about that you think is important to mention before I let you go? Because man, oh man, the insights you have. Anything that I should have asked you about that I didn't?
You could ask me. He's gonna be Olympic champion.
Yeah. So yeah, that's right. Big deal, huh?
Yeah, in my opinion, it's gonna be Germany twice. So, but I might be a little bit biased. But other than that, I think you covered pretty much everything. Yeah.
Well, we know they got good coaches over there, right? So, and I won't hold the fact that you worked with Iowa, even though I'm in here in Ohio. I'm a Buckeye. But I love Iowa. Iowa's program, like that is just, they're just always good. They're such a tough out every year, very well coached. And so it doesn't surprise me that you were part of their success
Yeah, I just love the entire blue collar mentality of the Midwest. And that's still to this day, even 10 years later, a big part of my coaching philosophy. And just like being hard-nosed and resilient, but also being smart about it. And so, yeah, that was really a defining time.
And I remember, like, you said something about one of your favorite quotes. You can't pull from an empty cup. Came from a guy you work with in Iowa. Can you talk about that briefly?
Yeah, it's. I think I talked about that when I was a guest at a different podcast. And we got two small kids at home, and we're talking about just challenges of being a coach and being away a lot, and then also being a father and a husband. And I was kind of referring to just taking care of yourself and trying to be a good role model and be healthy, and just being the cup that's never empty, so you can pour from it, not just to your family but to your athletes and your colleagues at work as well. So that's always been kind of like a something I've been living by. Yeah.
Well, I may have to steal that from you, Coach, because that's a great one. Thank you so much, Dr. Overkamp, for taking some time and joining us today. I really, really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
We'll have you back, especially when you get this study pinned down. I can't wait. We'll go over the data with you and the results when you get it all back and get it all together. I appreciate it.
Awesome, of course.
So if you know a great coach like Dr. Overkamp who's doing great things, winning games, and doing it with sports data and analytics, we'd love to hear about him. We'll even have him here on the podcast as a guest. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Connexon Sports, or look for us on LinkedIn at Connexon Sports and Media. Remember, we want you to innovate the game by collecting the data, getting insights, and turning those insights into action. We'll see you next time.